Hi there, welcome to Where's the Money Gone, a podcast about football, finance, governance and politics with me, Adrian Goldberg. I'm a West Bromwich Albion season ticket holder and an investigative journalist, joined as usual by Charlie Methven. Charlie is the chief executive of Charlton Athletic, a one-time director of Sunderland. He has given his professional advice to both Arsenal and Spurs and grew up following the mighty Oxford United. This week, we're talking about the link between football and dementia. There are plans for a major new campaign calling on football to take greater responsibility for long-term brain injuries caused by heading the ball. And up for the cup, how Tamworth were denied a great day out at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, as well as being robbed of a potentially life-changing boost to their bank balance by the decision to axe FA Cup replays. First, though, Charlie, a blank weekend for you. Charlton Athletic out of the FA Cup. My team, the Baggies, were hammered 5-1 in the third round at Bournemouth. But what does a high-flying football executive like yourself do on a weekend when there's no game?
Well, first of all, Adrian, I have to correct you. Charlton Athletic are not out of the FA Cup. Our game against Preston North End was postponed yesterday owing to a frozen pitch. So we are still up and running, and when the draw gets made tomorrow, we will be in the hat.
I should point out that we are recording this on a Sunday, so some of these eventualities will already have been worked out. So my apologies. I hadn't realised that the addicts were still in the cup. You'll forgive me for missing Charlton Preston as as one of the big ties of the round, but good luck to you again.
Well, thank you very much, and commiserations on your thumping defeat. In answer to your question. In the last week, if you were to call me a high-flying executive, for once you'd be right, because I actually did fly somewhere. I flew, as I do twice a year, to Jamaica to try and further our partnership there, and speak to the Jamaica Football Federation about various other elements of partnership we're planning with them, and also to give the family a little bit of a break, because I'm afraid that family Christmases, when you're a football club executive, are not quite as sort of the thing as they are for, quote, normal families. We had home matches on Boxing Day and on the 29th of December. I think I finished work at about 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, so that I could get Christmas Day off at least. But then Boxing Day was hectic, then debriefing on the day after Boxing Day, and then you're preparing for the match on the 29th. So the family needed a bit of a break after that, so that they were on holiday at the same time. So it's been a good period. Charlton won lots of games over Christmas, managed to get away for a few days, and coming back into the bracing London air. When we landed at Heathrow this morning, it was -4, which was a great way to be welcomed back to the mother country.
Indeed. Well, good to have you back. And as I say, good luck to Charlton. And I'll have egg on my face if Charlton now get all the way through to Wembley in the final, having discounted them before they've been knocked out. On to more serious matters, in a way. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and his Merseyside counterpart, Steve Rotherham, are calling for changes to the Football Governance Bill going through Parliament, which would put a legal onus on the football authorities and the Players' Union, the PFA, to develop a care and support scheme for ex-players with dementia and other neurodegenerative conditions. Now, few people now doubt the link between heading a football and brain injury, following research in Glasgow by Professor Willie Stewart, who found that chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, what used to be known as punch drunk syndrome, was found in the brains of former England footballers Nobby Stiles and Jeff Astle. Here's Natalie Parks-Thompson. Natalie is the daughter of former Blackburn Rovers midfielder Tony Parks. Tony was a Premier League winner with Rovers, a veteran of 350 games. Unfortunately, he now has dementia. And I asked Natalie when she first realised her dad had problems.
Probably after my mum died. My mum sadly passed away of terminal cancer, and I cared for her as well. And adjusting to life on his own, he found really, really difficult, which is for a while why I thought it was just grief. and he's acting a bit oddly because he's just missing my mum. But as time went on, these kind of odd behaviours became more apparent. You know, he'd go out in clothes and they'd still have the tag on them, like the security tag or a label. And it wasn't that he was pinching them. He didn't think about cutting these things off. You know, he'd look at a banana and call it an orange, but to him it was an orange. And there were lots of little things. You know, he started kind of withdrawing from life. He wouldn't go to the football, which was his happy place. And it was those kind of early signs that I was on maternity leave with my first child at the time, and I thought, actually, this isn't right. There's something else here. But the diagnosis process took quite a long time to get him to see somebody, because last time we went to a GP, we got the terminal diagnosis of my mum's cancer, so we didn't want to engage with medical assistance. But when we did, it was quite clear he failed the memory test by a country mile.
And you ended up, because your mum had passed away, being his full-time carer, having to give up your job as a teacher, and you'd already got one child. There was a second one on the way. I can't imagine how difficult that was for you.
It was horrific. I mean, it feels in a way another lifetime when I think about it now. I think my situation is a little bit unique that, you know, I do stand alone with my dad. A lot of people see carers as being a partner, a wife, a husband, a little bit older. Whereas, you know, I have dependents of my own, and trying to navigate those early days when I was pregnant and I had a toddler, I didn't know which way to turn. And I was told quite early on by the health visitor that if my dad continued to live in the house with me, that social services would have to get involved to make sure my children were okay, because the risk of him leaving the front door open and my toddler running out into the main road was really, really high, because he just had no awareness of, he wanted to get out, he would run. I mean, one occasion I had to leave him alone while I went for my 20-week scan, meant to be a really kind of happy time. And I got a phone call off a friend who lives around the corner to say, well, your dad's wandering up and down the road. What do you want me to do? I couldn't leave my scan. So I had to say to her, well, can you try and encourage him to come into your house and give him a cup of tea and see if you can keep him safe that way? He just couldn't be left. And it just, you know, I just couldn't balance the roles of the two, and the guilt, putting my dad in a care home to become and carry on being a mum. I still struggle with that decision, even though it was the right thing to do, because he'd want me to live my life. You know, I feel, you know, changes are being made in the early parts of the game. You know, the education, we know more about CTE, we know more about dementia, motor neuron. But these latter stages, I still feel like it's a closed door. You know, as soon as they can't access these memory clubs that are out there and get out into the community, then what? And that's my dad. You know, he's just shut away now in a care home because he can't cognitively work out how he can bend his body to get into a car anymore. So I can't take him out.
So just tell me what you want the football industry to do, whether you want that to come from the PFA, the Premier League, the FA, and how they might be able to help your dad and other people in his situation.
I think it just needs to be, Andy Burnham said it quite strongly out there, this kind of industrial disease. I think there just needs to be more recognition nationally that this is a really important issue and it's a health issue. And I think going through Parliament, I think, you know, we need to take it away from the PFA. Yes, they have their role, and I know they are working behind the scenes in certain aspects of this. But I think it needs to go to Parliament to get something kind of written in stone that people like my dad, who gave his entire life to a job that he loved, but he didn't know the risk. Footballers today know the risk when they kind of signed the contract. My dad didn't, but now I feel like he's abandoned. And I just think trying to push this through Parliament and getting some kind of consistent care, a support package that means that it's probably too late for my dad. By the time this goes through, he's probably not going to be here. But to know that somebody else can benefit knowing that if they get this god-awful disease, that they get to a certain point in their care, and then families will know that this residential care, you know, they will have support meeting those costs, or that new care homes are built where footballers can go in. I think will take a lot of the strain off, because up to now, the fear, every family member in Football Families for Justice, I don't know what I'm going to do if we have to put them in residential care. We can't afford it.
So, Charlie, that's very powerful testimony there from Natalie Parks-Thompson. I should say that the Premier League and the PFA last year did set up a £1 million fund to help families like Natalie's. But the consensus of the meeting with Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, which was attended by lots of former players and the family members of former players, was that that was nowhere near enough. What do you make of the campaign?
It's a huge issue in not just football, but in other sports as well. Rugby, American football are going through their own tortures in this area. It's a massive problem. It's affecting a generation of footballers who did not earn all that well, even if they were very, very, top players like Tony Parks or Jeff Astle, that they weren't big earners. So it wasn't like they were able to put stuff away for a rainy day, that when they finished playing football, they went off and became an insurance salesman or a pub landlord or whatever it might be. So really, they and their families never really enjoyed the financial benefits from the game that the current generation do. I think it's generally accepted that the industry as a whole, and particularly the Professional Footballers Association and the FA, have not been focused enough on this, because it's been clear for some time. I know that sort of formal confirmation maybe came a little bit later, but it's been, particularly for someone like you who follows the Baggies, obviously the Jeff Astle case has been apparent for a long, long time now. I'm thinking 15, 20 years, that type of thing. And it's certainly in the last 10 years, all of us in the industry have been aware that there is almost certainly linkage, and that more needs to be done about it. Now, what can be done? Well, first of all, when the new TV deal was struck back in the day and the new percentages were allocated, Gordon Taylor, then chief executive of the PFA, was very clever in getting a percentage allocated for the PFA. And this is, for me, this is what that kind of money is there for. £1 million is neither here nor there. The PFA's reserves are infinitely higher than that, and they need to be doing more. And I think those of us who are involved in the industry now need to be very proactive in terms of engaging with science and the latest science and the latest practices to ensure that this generation of footballers do not suffer the same fate. And this is more anecdotal. Having seen the footballs that they played with 30, 40 years ago, do I think that the modern football is probably a little bit less likely to cause that level of damage? Yeah. Do I think that stopping players from heading the ball when they're playing football at a very young age will help? Yes, because those skulls are not fully developed, and that is not, clearly going to have an outsized impact. But there are other things that we need to be doing, such as really sort of being very cautious about concussions, which has certainly happened in game, but really has to happen in training as well. And the tracking of concussions, so that when a player moves from club to club, effectively their concussion record travels with them to the new club, so that the new club understands how many concussions and of what type that player has had. All of these things, and helping the industry, helping to fund continuing research into this matter, because frankly, football is a game, and no game is worth killing people. And, much as we want it to continue exactly as it is, if in the end the research shows that it's going to continue to kill people, then we have to consider changing the game. And that's just the way of things. It is a game, and it's no good saying, well, they're professional footballers, they've got a choice. We all know that they'll all take the choice to play, because that's what young men do. Young men do take that, and they feel like they're invulnerable, that like invulnerable, immortal, and we're going to live forever, etc. But fundamentally, if as adults we let them take that choice, knowing that it's going to have, or very likely or very possible to have, severe impacts down the line, then I don't think that we're being responsible adults. So I think we all need to do more. I welcome this initiative. I welcome it being kept at the top of the agenda. It's all too easy. Oh well, we put £1 million in a pot somewhere and that's that done for a while. We've sort of, we're all okay now. It's not like that. It really isn't. This is too important and too big, and has the implications for the game are just too wide. If you look at what's happening in terms of participation for American football and rugby, American football in the US and rugby here, you're looking at youth participation rates falling, and that is because mothers do not want their sons, daughters as well, I guess, to be exposed to that level of risk of head injury. And football or soccer in the US has had, generally speaking, a cleaner bill of health as far as parents are concerned when it comes to this type of thing. And if we're to retain that position of parents wanting their children to play football, which is pretty crucial for the industry as a whole when you think about it, then we need to do whatever it takes to make sure that we take this issue very, very, very seriously. As I said, I think there's enough money in the game right now to look after those ex-players who are affected. I think, when you consider the huge sums washing around the game as a whole, to ensure that former professional footballers are looked after, as in the situation that Tony Park's in, I think is absolutely a moral imperative. But we also need to be looking forward, and we need to be very, very mindful and proactive, as Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham are being, in making sure that we do the best for the future as well.
Yeah, and I think it is important, I know you touched on it there, to recognise that this can impact and has impacted potentially women players as well. At the meeting in Manchester that I attended, there was a representative of a former Lionesses international, and forgive me, I can't remember her name just at the moment, but who also has dementia. And so a friend of hers came and made a case as well for women footballers to be represented here. And I suppose there are two issues that arise for me, Charlie. One is whether football has a responsibility as an industry to look after these ex-players, which is what Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham are calling for, a statutory financial responsibility upon the game. And then that broader question, and this affects me directly or very closely anyway, in that my daughter is 10 and plays, and at the age of 10 she and her teammates are not allowed to head the ball. I think that is a good thing, and I do wonder whether in maybe 10-15 years time we will be talking about the demise of the header from football. Those of us who've grown up watching great footballers like Jeff Astor, fantastic headers of the ball, would very much miss that, and it would change the game. But as you say, no game is worth losing your life for.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think some balance is required. I think there are many steps that one needs to go through and research that needs to be done before one does end up at that place. I think, does one push the age limit from 10 to 12 to 14, that type of thing? Because effectively, when you think about the growth of a human being, the maturity of a human being, finishing puberty is a sort of critical element in someone's physical development, and that hasn't happened at 10, but it has happened mostly at 14. And then looking from there forwards in terms of, okay, is that going to make a difference? Is that starting to make a difference? Tracking everything, being very on it, being very mindful of, sort of control programs, all the types of things that science does well, we should be looking at as an industry and doing it very quickly and proactively, rather than hanging around waiting for inquiries and all this type of stuff. We kind of know this is a problem. We need to confront it now.
Interesting stuff, and that is a story I'm sure that will develop over the coming months. I only given a brief taste of some of the heart-rending testimony that I heard from family members, and given that Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham are seeking to tie this to the Football Governance Bill, which is something we've discussed many times on this podcast and will do again, I think this is a story that is going to recur over the coming months, and I think we both agree it's a very important one. Let's talk about the FA Cup, Charlie. And although I've summarily dismissed Charlton from the FA Cup for this year, sadly, Tamworth, a team who play not a million miles away from where I'm recording this, have sadly gone out of the cup after extra time against Tottenham Hotspur. They took the mighty
Oh,
Spurs.
I know. What a pig, eh?
Is that a cunning reference to the Tamworth too? Is it, Charlie? I think it is. But in times gone by, and by which I mean last season, Tamworth would not have been valiant losers in extra time to Tottenham Hotspur, when, of course, the additional physical prowess of full-time footballers, elite footballers, can come to the fore. They would have had a replay. They would have had a replay at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which would have been a day to treasure forever. And we're here partly to talk about the money, but as a football fan, that is the romance, the nostalgia. Tamworth have held Spurs over 90 minutes. They're going to go to London. They're going to get a day out in the capital. And the whole town of Tamworth, I know, many people who perhaps don't go to a game any other time would have travelled for that. And it just would have been such a wonderful occasion, as well as the financial impact that that could have had for Tamworth. So there we go. The decision to scrap replays once the first round starts. There's your first casualty, if you like, the romance and the finance of impacts on Tamworth.
You may or may not remember that of all the podcasts we did last season, probably the one which I got most irate and fired up about was this decision. And I addressed it first of all from the position of a fan, and being back as that young boy following Oxford United, a financially struggling team in what was then the Championship, but nonetheless a financially struggling team in the 1990s, and having a day for the ages at Ellen Road after having held them at the Manor Ground, taking them back to Ellen Road and scoring a last-minute winner to go through 3-2, and Leeds United were the champions at that point. And that's one of the 3 or 4 most memorable moments of my life. I remember everything about it. I was that perfect age. I was 16 and 17, something like that, you know, perfect age, impressionable, keen, independent enough to be able to go on my own, etc., etc., etc. And that cemented me. That was one of the moments that cemented me in my football fandom, real football fandom, really caring about it, really wanting to pass it on down to my children and so on and so forth. These are really, really valuable moments. You know, there would have been, if Tamworth had gone to the to White Hart Lane, they would have taken probably 3,000 or 4,000 people, and in amongst that crowd would have been 700 or 800 youngsters taken up to the capital for their big night out. You know, taken out of school at 3:15, crammed onto a train down to the capital to watch their local team play at Tottenham in one of the greatest stadiums in the world against some of the top players in the world. And that would have then cemented some of them as football fans the rest of their lives. It was a terrible, terrible decision. And just, if anything was required to explain why we need a football regulator, it was that decision. It was that craven, pathetic decision by the Football Association to cave in to the Premier League, in you know, just because they needed a few bits and bobs of cash to pay a few of their horrible bills. Oh, okay, well, what can we give you? Well, you could scrap FA Cup replays so we don't have to worry about playing twice against these tin pot teams, etc., etc. It just showed how pathetic and morally corrupt the Football Association has become, bankrupt. And we were told at the time, oh, but these replays never really happen. It's all in your imagination. And they come up with sort of bizarre statistics. Meaningful replays only happen once every 13 years when the full moon's out and when various different things happen and all this type of stuff. It's all in the past, that stuff. These replays, they don't really happen. Of course, they bloody do every single season. And this, as you say, Tamworth, it was always going to happen, wasn't it? There was always going to be a non-league club denied a life-changing replay in the first season this happened. And so it has happened now. I hope that the people involved are hanging their heads in shame, but they're shameless, so they won't. There will be no shame. They are utterly, utterly shameless. And next time they stand up and say, well, we don't really need a football regulator. I hope this gets shouted down. Get out of here. You guys are ruining our national sport, and you need somebody to come in and stop you ruining it any longer. In terms of financial implications, Adrian, one of the things that the FA said in defence was that, oh, well, it means that we're going to now give lots more money in prize money. In fact, it was a very small amount more in prize money, an extra sort of 5 or 10,000 quid here or there, spread quite widely. Nice to have, but not going to be life-changing for anybody. But fundamentally, Tamworth, for reaching the third round but losing in the third round, would have received £100,000. A club of their kind would have annual revenues of maybe about £1 million a year, something like that. So it's meaningful.
Sorry to interrupt there, Charlie. When you say £100,000, is that exclusive of the gate receipts on the day?
Yeah, that's the prize money. I mean, the gate receipts are going to be something or nothing because they have to share them with Spurs.
Yeah. Is it my understanding is it 40, 20, 40% to the home team, 40% to the away team, 20% in the pot?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. Costs get taken out first, right? And then it gets shared out. Who knows? Perhaps they would have made £40,000 or £50,000 from the match itself, and £100,000 in total prize money for getting to the third round. So look, fantastic and well deserved, by the way, because they had to win an awful lot of games to get there. They started off in the qualifying competition. And it's games like that that have been shown on TV around the world today that make the FA Cup. So 100,000 quid is the least that they should get. They probably would have got a share of some TV money as well on top of that. But let's put that into perspective. Let's put that into perspective with what, as Jim Bowen used to say in Bullseye, what you could have won, right? So what they would have got if they had got their replay at White Hart Lane is something in the region of £800,000.
Wow.
Right. On top of all the money that they have received elsewhere. So it would have been £1 million for the tie as a whole. And that is the moment which is life-changing for these types of clubs. That's the moment which enables them finally to redo their old grandstand. That's the moment which finally enables them to put a 3G pitch in so that they can actually get revenue coming in during the week and all this type of stuff. That's the moment when they can afford to have a proper under-18 team, all of these types of things. And that money is now no longer allowable to them because the Premier League have decided that they don't want clubs to have that money. They don't want them to have that opportunity. And that's just really sad, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's a twin thing, isn't it? It is about the romance and it is about the finance. And your old pal, Damien Collins, former Conservative MP, I went to see him at the House of Commons a few months ago for my book, Where's the Money Gone? And he was talking about, although he's a Man United fan, going to watch his local club, Hereford, play Arsenal. And one of his most vivid early football memories was a game at Edgar Street where Hereford United, who were got a great cup tradition and really a club built on a cup tradition, where they held Arsenal to a draw at Edgar Street. And it's those things that stick with people that make football, and as you say, have made the FA Cup what it is. It is why people all around the world are interested in the FA Cup. It's unimaginable in other football competitions around the world. And that is the joy of it. And a little bit of that joy, a little bit of the joy of life has been squeezed out by this decision, not to mention the finance, which of course is very important. Listen, Charlie, great to speak to you as always. Good luck to Charlton. I hope I haven't jinxed you now. I'm sure you've jinxed me. I'm sure you'll go on to reach the semi-final or something.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so, Adrian.
Great to speak to you as always. By the way, just to let you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe to make sure that you don't miss an episode. Likewise, if you're listening to this on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, please do leave a review and subscribe as well. And there's a fantastic podcast I listen to called 500 Songs That Made Rock and Roll, or something like that, by a fantastic researcher called Andrew Hickey. And as he always says, a personal recommendation is the most powerful of all. So if you do enjoy this podcast, please just mention it to another football fan and encourage them to enjoy it as well. Before we go, just to say thank you to Mark Machado at 11:29 for handling our socials, and Jed Thomas, who helps with the production of these episodes as well. We'll see you again next week. Good luck in the FA Cup against Preston, Charlie. Take care. See you soon.
Thanks, Adrian. See you next week.